Hello and welcome to another episode in our mini-series from the Developing Practice podcast. This series is all about hybrid practice, whether that be leading hybrid teams, developing hybrid teaching or working in a hybrid manner. We have spoken with lots of guests over the last couple of years and have extracted snippets of conversations for this series. Today's compilation is all about the experiences of working in a hybrid environment. We hope you enjoy. Obviously, the impact of COVID-19 has been far-reaching in our personal and professional lives. And then the university has done a great deal of work on the hybrid active learning. So and obviously that's our main sort of topic of discussion for today's podcast. Could you perhaps summarise this approach and how it has shaped your thoughts on hybrid practice more generally?
Yes, of course. As you say, a huge amount of work has been undertaken to develop hybrid active learning. It's been a monumental effort by colleagues across the university. It's important to recognise that the move to hybrid active learning is a longer term process. And what we currently see is the move to gradually embed the core principles of hybrid active learning into our approach to curriculum design, teaching delivery, assessment, and so on, as we respond to the challenges of COVID. But to put it simply for our purposes, hybrid active learning is a model of education which draws on face-to-face and online modes of teaching, maximising the benefits of each to ensure that we provide our students with really high-class opportunities for learning, while simultaneously responding to the challenges brought about by the pandemic, in particular those challenges being our ability to utilise on-campus spaces and resources. So clearly at the current time, we see this hybrid approach leaning heavily towards what we might call online learning, given the current restrictions. But within online learning, we still have the blend between synchronous and asynchronous delivery. And throughout all of this work, we have a real focus on reflection on what are the most effective ways to support student learning. And it's that last point, I think, that presents the key aspect of hybrid active learning. That is the importance of decision-making that those using the models need to deploy. So selecting the appropriate mode, form, and content in relation to the learning objectives and the desired educational outcomes. And I think that's perhaps where we can broaden the discussion. While the hybrid active learning model relates to teaching practice, teaching doesn't happen in a vacuum and is part of a wider university ecosystem. And as such, it's become clear that all of us within the organisation and indeed the sector, whatever our role and function, are now confronted by the need to reflect on, to rethink and to adjust our practice within the realities of what we might call a hybrid university environment. So just as the strategies of hybrid teaching will vary significantly according to the subject matter being taught and the needs of learners, so hybrid practice will need to vary according to the role and context in which we operate, the needs of those that we work with, and so on. So we need to ask ourselves, how will we make decisions about which approaches are best deployed as professionals to maximise the value of our work? And I think that raises some really interesting questions. How might we collectively approach this challenge of adapting to hybrid practice? How will this affect colleagues? How can this transition be supported? How can it result in positive outcomes? And I think that's all despite the difficulties within which this move has been initiated, a global pandemic. So I think it does raise really interesting questions if we extrapolate from hybrid active learning to that wider idea of hybrid practice in a hybrid university environment.
So if we want to unpack that a little bit, as you say, we've all need to rethink our practices as academics and as colleagues from professional services as a result of COVID. But what are some of those implications of this new environment for colleagues in non-teaching roles specifically across the university?
So I suppose in short, the functions which we provide and the context in which our delivery occurs are now fundamentally affected by the same forces that are affecting the delivery of education for our students. But I think in reality, the implications of hybrid will to a large extent be shared across teaching and non-teaching roles. COVID, if we take a step back, maybe COVID's caused us to reflect on, adapt and modify our practice over a very short space of time. It's cast into doubt our usual ways of working, and it's demanded significant changes in the delivery of our teaching, our research, and our services. It's changed, the way we communicate, our use of technology, our relationships with each other, how we work with our colleagues, how we collaborate, and how we lead and manage our colleagues. It's affected how we understand our roles and our professional identities, the functions we're employed to fulfill. It's, from our point of view as developers, it's changing the skills and knowledge that we need, the schedules that we work to, and the demands that are placed upon us. And it continues to change. And this is really interesting for me, I think, perhaps harking back to my PhD, but it continues to change our relationship to and our assumptions about home, work, and the distinction between the two. How we interact with our family, our friends, our colleagues, and the spaces in which everyday life is played out, including work. I think it's asking new sort of critically important questions about how we support staff and student well-being, mental health, wider health and safety. And it's also really importantly challenging the ways in which we consider issues of equality and diversity and inclusivity. So to go back to your question, there's no doubt that COVID-19 has engaged us in an ongoing transition from where we were to where we're sort of heading. The problem is that there's no clear endpoint at this moment in time. And that can understandably leave all of us, whether in teaching or non-teaching roles, feeling unsure and ill-prepared, I suppose. However, I would want to stress a positive that many of us have perhaps seen for ourselves. This transition from our previous way of working also brings with it new opportunities to reflect on and to develop our practice. But I personally think that locating our own agency within all of this change can help us to take control and to make sense of it.
What we're finding, Claire, at the moment is there's a lot of discussion, as you can imagine, across the university about how we're going to be working in the future. And it's really interesting that your role at the moment is supporting an organisation to work out the kind of strategy to support people to develop their roles. Yeah. And I guess that's part of the conversation we're trying to have as well, across the university at the moment. So hearing about your work in terms of your experience of mixed modalities, is something that we're, really trying to think about in terms of people working remotely and also working on site. And we're calling that kind of hybrid working as we explore that. But at the moment, most of us at the university, not all of us, but a lot of us are still online. So we're just starting to think about going back onto campus and what that might look like. Can you tell us about some of the benefits that you've seen from your experience of working this way?
Yeah, certainly. So I think from a personal perspective, it gives you more freedom to be able to work in the way that best suits you. We all probably know there are times of the day or even times of the week that you feel more engaged and motivated, switched on, and ideas are flowing and things are easy. And you can take advantage of those times. And maybe when things aren't flowing as well, or that you maybe have a dip at a certain time of day, you can kind of work around that and you can accommodate that within your working day. And I found that really, really probably to be the most beneficial aspect of all. I think there's also something in there around being able to incorporate other parts of your life that are important. It's not just about when do I work best or when do I know I need to take a break? But I think one of the things that it's making us do, all of us, and it certainly made me do, is think about your whole life and all of the things that are in there. It can be sometimes people experience it as a problem to sort of have to mix work and home life in this new way. But if you can begin to think about it in the context of your whole life and all the things that you like to do, or all the things that you need to do, whether it would be families and children or other commitments that you might have, or exercise, or whatever it might be, it gives you a way to be able to incorporate more of that in a kind of guilt-free way, I would say. So I think being plunged, if you like, into this way of working before many organizations had a chance to really think about it. In some respects, it's been difficult, but I think it's been good because it's forced people to have to do it and to see how it can work. And I think if you can take that mindset on it, then it's quite helpful. I think from the organization's perspective as well, it's really interesting that there's long been a debate around agile working, hybrid working, working from home, and what that does to the relationships between the individual, their line manager, with teams. Will people actually work and do what they need to do, and will the outcome and performance be the same, or will it be different? And I think it's made us do it, hasn't it? We've had to actually just plunge right in and do it. And from my perspective, I think it seems to be working really well. I think that debate and that conversation around, can we trust, can we let go, can we release people to be professional, and can we trust people? The answer is absolutely yes, we can, because it's working. And I see it working in our organisation, and I'm sure that's replicated across many organisations. And I think that's really quite liberating and interesting and exciting. The other thing I would say, and I'd like to claim this as an original thought, but it's not. It was a conversation I heard on the radio the other day, which was lots of organisations were already talking about agile working, hybrid working, and there's been a gradual move towards that for many years, hasn't there? But actually, the experience of doing this in a pandemic is not the same as it will be or would be without those circumstances. So I do wonder that where we've got situations where maybe people are struggling with it and really finding it difficult is to try and maybe think about all those difficulties, because we're all just in a really difficult and stressful situation anyway, and people are coping with all sorts of things in their lives, and the whole environment is very, very difficult. It may be different when things start to open up and we start to go back into being able to, in your case, being on campus more often. It may feel different without that backdrop to it. We may find that it is actually much more positive than we ever thought it would be.
I mean, we're recording in early March now, and one of the things we're picking up as we talk to people through these podcasts is people are almost coming out the other end and trying to reassess where they're at in terms of their team well-being even. Are you sensing you're going to have to, maybe when we do return to campus or over the next few months, really start to address where people are at, because we've just been reacting so quickly to the pandemic over the last year? Do you think there's going to be some work around supporting people now to transition into maybe what the new way of life will be?
Massive piece of work, I think. I mean, I don't think anyone has come through this last year unchanged. Everyone's taken the opportunity to reassess priorities, look at, work-life balance, what's important to them. Everyone's thinking about how they want to work going forward and where they want to work. And the challenge for me and probably other managers across the institution is going to be how we can make it work for everyone. And for the organisation as well. I love as much as anyone else the sort of utopian vision of work being a place where you can rock up to with your laptop and have a coffee with people and innovate, and then you can spend other days at home where you can go for big long walks at lunchtime on the beach and pick your kids up from school and all of that. That's something that we all should strive for, and we should keep hold of those bits that we all think are important. But also, I'm really realistic about the challenge of managing everybody's different ideas around what work's going to be and how we still keep the things that are really, really important about the office and how we work together, like, how new team members learn, how we foster a culture, how we innovate. I think a lot of the innovation that I've seen within my team has come from people with shared interests having chance conversations. How do we do that when everything's so formal and you have to book a meeting? So, yeah, I think, lots of challenges around well-being, coming back to work and what on earth that is ever going to look like for everyone.
Well, you've mentioned lockdown, and it's fair to say that the world has significantly changed over the last 12 months in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the way we work in the university continues to evolve and change, massively over the last 12 months. So can you tell us about some of the ways that you've had to change in relation to the way that you work personally?
Yeah, my last working day in London was the 9th of March. Remember it well. And I remember coming back home and feeding off the news. I remember saying to my PA, look, let's cancel my appointments just for a couple of weeks, see where this thing is actually going to go. And that was the last time I was in London. And I have to say, initially, I was utterly lost. I was bemused. I was confused. To be honest, I didn't even know who I was. My whole identity, which I hadn't quite realised, was wrapped up in dashing into London, doing lots and lots of teas and coffees, dinners, going to networking events, teaching, training. And then overnight, it stopped. So I wasn't what you call a doctor, where I just jumped into the technology and I did this. I went and painted my shed and my fences outside because I just didn't know what to do. I really didn't. I was utterly confused. So it took me quite some time to get into, well, who am I if I'm not presenting to a group of people? And it took a little while for me to get the energy as well. However, it took me about 6 months. So I was quite lucky. I didn't need to move particularly fast. I could do it in my own time. I was in a good place in that sense. And then it just took me a little while to work out what the heck I was going to do and how was I going to do my business. But one of the things I wanted to achieve was to make a transition. I've been thinking about it anyway. So my life was running around like a complete lunatic, probably too much so. And this has actually helped me make the transition from always in London to being majority of the time from home and actually coming into London as and when I need to. And I'm still not in any rush to go back, to be fair. So therefore, everything now is, as we all are, is online. And to be absolutely honest, I've actually not noticed the difference. And that might sound a bit bizarre.
Well, it is interesting, especially with networking. How our HR director said recently in an open meeting about it's easy to maintain a relationship through Zoom, but it's not necessarily the same to initiate a relationship through Zoom. Do you agree with that, or have you seen something completely different in your area?
No, I tell you, I 100% disagree. Now, this is an extrovert speaking, so you've got to be really clear on this one. I'm not an introvert. I'm not shy. I'm not lacking confidence. I am out there. Now, so my business is about finding a lot of people I don't know, strangers. Okay. And I do majority of my activity through LinkedIn and through recommendations. So I have met more people, I think, strangers on a one-to-one basis than I've ever done in my 20 years as running my business. So I completely 100% get, there are those that need that one-to-one physical contact. I 100% get that. However, I also 100% know, and it's proven that we can do near enough everything through the screen. Yeah. Absolutely. People want to engage, people want to talk, they want to exchange. So, but there are differences, but those differences aren't wrong differences. They're not bad differences, they're just differences. Okay, so I've had to learn not to get past that yearning for I need to be out there. So I must admit, what I've personally done, I've translated my yearning into my bubble, people that I can socialize with in my village. Okay, so I've sort of transferred all of my energy into those face-to-faces. And then from a business perspective, I'm 100%, I have not noticed any difference in talking to strangers and building a relationship. Not one iota of difference. Now, there are differences, but not bad differences. So I can still build the trust. I can still take the conversations where I want to go. But the differences is that some conversations are shorter than what they would have been, because there's more transactional conversations rather than that chitty chat. But I think for all of us, we've got to learn what are those soft touches. I was doing a session the other day for a client, and if you go back to when we did face-to-face coffee, what were the icebreakers that we used to do? So they would have been, love the shoes that you're wearing, Alex, through to nice tie you got on there, Matt, to this is a great coffee shop, haven't been here before. You would make an observational comment to break the ice, and then you sit down, what coffee do you want, tea you want, and then you gradually get into the conversation. Some people want more social stuff, and other people want to get on with, let's talk about why we're here. There's no difference. I mean, I was talking to this guy before coming on here, and as soon as his screen come on, clearly the wife or someone had sent them flowers. I mean, it looked like he was in a greenhouse. And so I just go straight into, this is within seconds of him coming on. As soon as his screen opens up, I went, wow, look at that greenhouse. Look at those flowers. Aren't they awesome? And I would have done nothing different to if we were meeting face to face. So I'm saying, so I'm coming closer to the screen going, are they fuchsias back there? Cool, I bet that smell must be gorgeous. So we just chatted, and then he's going, so where are you based? And so you just use the environment around you in order to create the same exchange as you would have done. I was talking to another guy last night, and he's bang, get on with it. Bang, bang, bang. We were 10 minutes on the phone, but we still got where we wanted to get to. So no, I think if we try to insist that we go back to the way that it was, then I think we're making a mistake.
How hybrid approaches can help support international collaboration. Could you expand on what you mean by hybrid in this setting?
Yeah. So I think those colleagues who are listening to this podcast will be very familiar with hybrid from teaching and all the huge amount of work that we've had to put into place to suddenly rethink all of our pedagogy, our teaching practice. So I think really the same principle applies to research. So it involves looking at what you'd originally planned, and then thinking through, talking through with your team. Firstly, what elements work best face-to-face and which work best virtually? So what can we get sort of the best of both worlds? But parallel with that, of course, is what can we safely deliver face-to-face, and what should we definitely move online? So it's both thinking about the kind of the practicalities, which is that last point I mentioned, but also what the kind of the positives. So there will be, in fact, some elements that might work best virtually, but others that you feel work well or work best possibly face-to-face. And then related to that, in terms of research, of course, it's the methodology. So it's thinking through your research methods, which for the most part, depending on when you started your project, but are likely to have been planned prior to the pandemic. So it's thinking through how those methods, which you might have planned as face-to-face, so for example, interviews, field work in the lab, but Helen might be able to say a bit more about that, thinking through any of those, whether you could find parallel methods that are virtual ones.
I guess some of it is kind of knowing in advance that you're going to be thinking about that mix of virtual and face-to-face. That for me is what hybrid is really about. It's not saying we're doing face-to-face, and if we run into trouble, we've got this kind of fallback position. So some of the advice I've been given to some of our researchers is to say, don't plan on the basis of face-to-face as being the number one solution. Think of both things being possible, and think of that right from the start. Because if you do run into further restrictions, or you find people somehow can't travel to make a particular event, you can deliver it in a different way. It's just kind of thinking about it right from the start in a different, the different potential and different techniques you could use. That for me is really what's kind of powerful about that concept, a hybrid.
I think just to add, in our sort of area around partnerships, where
we're looking at how we can kind of create connectivity and encourage connectivity between people. We're trying to develop these kind of hybrid models of fellowships where students can work with staff in Liverpool and vice versa, or students can work with partners. But traditionally, we've done that through travel and mobility grants. So now we're looking at whether we can do that virtually. So things like mentoring and joining events and courses that might be running in Liverpool and with partner institutions, doing that online. And then considering the physical travel as something that might happen further down the line to kind of augment that experience. So the kind of the first experience is virtual and you get the relationships going. And then when there's a real purpose to travel, then that can be an extra that's added on further down the line. It's kind of changing things round. So it's not sort of travel is the number one priority. Travel is kind of the secondary extra bonus, if you like, after you've done the virtual.
I'm just interested in the that point about students, and I was just going to ask whether there is a bit of a generation gap in terms of sort of embracing hybrid and virtual, or do you think everybody is facing this challenge, or do you think a younger generation are actually kind of much happier with that sort of approach? It's just a general question. I didn't have the answer to that.
I think just from some of the things that I'm hearing about students and their willingness to get involved in collaborative online activities, that there's sort of two that I'm aware of at the moment. One is with the University of Georgia, where we are trying to bring students together from both business schools and look at a kind of a business challenge together. And there's been a very good take up there from our students in Ulms to participate in that. And also one that we've been looking at with a university in Peru around sustainability challenges, and also working with XJTLU students. And we've had no problem finding students to take part in those online activities together. And then it's a great way of bringing students, undergraduate students, you could do it postgraduate as well, together from completely different continents to work together on a particular challenge and get that kind of cultural experience and understanding of how other people may see a problem in a very different context to you without having to travel.